Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Raisa Kiwala, the divorced Muslim coach. And you're here joining me for this masterclass on parenting through divorce. So I'm going to share my screen here, and then we will get started. Okay. You're in the right place if you're here for navigating the troubled waters of parenting through divorce. So you are here if you've been experiencing any type of stress or anxiety that has been built up with your children's behavior. You're working really hard. Your kids are so off track, and it feels like a really heavy load to be able to move forward after your divorce, along with helping your children move forward. And it feels like you're carrying it all alone. You don't have time for all dealing with the behavior with your packed schedule. You know, your kids are off track, displaying tantrums, crying, defiance, risky behaviors, withdrawn, don't want to go to school, become defensive. You and your children are dealing with two new homes, new dynamics between mom's homes and dad's home, comparing homes, parenting styles. Maybe there isn't consistency between the two homes, and now you have to deal with your ex or a man that you want nothing to do with and co-parent your children together with different types of personalities. Maybe you're even in a marriage that's not healthy for you physically, emotionally, spiritually, or financially, and you're in this marriage because of your children. You know, maybe you are experiencing signs of parental alienation, and I'm using that word because it exists, but let me define it a little bit. You know, it's really when a parent psychologically manipulates a child to be aggressive or withdrawn or disconnect from another parent. And that can come out in children with oppositional behavior, defiant behavior, unwarranted aggression towards you in a way that your child didn't previously demonstrate. Your child is maybe shutting you out of their life, doesn't want to share any information about him or herself. Maybe the child is requesting you to not attend their sports events or their extracurricular activities, or their school events such as graduations or parent-teacher conference. You're shut out of school meetings by your ex, and maybe you're no longer listed as a parent under their schooling. Being challenged by your child when they are argumentative or defensive or combative. Hearing words from your children that are not their own words, but words that have come from their other parent. So those are all signs of parental alienation, of intentionally cutting off or coming in between the relationship of one parent. And children don't turn away from parents unless there is fear. So before we actually get started into digging into the content for today, I want to just thank you for taking your time to be here, to invest in learning something for yourself and for your family. And before we start, I want to really encourage you to close up all your tabs, your distractions, any other apps or social media that you have going. Get a pen and a notebook, and so you can take notes, focus on this time together that you have invested so it can benefit you fully without distractions. And stay tuned until the end where I want to share something special with you. So some of the things that we are going to cover today is your children's behavior, what it means, and how you can use it as your guide to knowing exactly what they need, and how to know that your children are okay if you are okay, and what does that mean, and um, how can you be okay, and regardless of the situation that's going on or the circumstance or what's happening in the background, how can you still be okay? And the two essential relationships that are going to save the day for you. So let me introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me and my story before we get started, so you can feel um, that we know each other, because maybe you may have been following me, or maybe you know a little bit about me. But my divorce almost 5 years ago was the impetus to my evolution, and I call it my spiritual and emotional rebirth. And that was through rediscovering my two most important relationships. And so I was in a codependent relationship. I relied and I depended on my ex for my emotional safety, security, happiness, and joy. So much so that I was willing to stay in a marriage at all costs, even sell my soul and lose my iman to stay in something that I felt um, I needed to breathe, to survive, like it was my oxygen. So as I found myself in an unexpected divorce, my heart broke and shattered into pieces, and I I had nowhere else to turn. Because my oxygen, if you will, was cut off. So what was I going to do? How was I going to breathe in terms of my survival? And I turned up and I went to the ultimate source that would never abandon me. And there I was able to transform. I was transformed. I was reborn to know myself as an individual, my identity as an individual, a soul created for the servitude of Allah, and know that I really get to know my creator, my provider, my sustainer, my maintainer, my protector, my true love, where all love stems from. And that is part of my story in terms of, understanding my two greatest relationships are my relationship with Allah and my relationship with myself through that relationship with Allah. And once I started to discover and cultivate those two relationships, all of the resources that I needed to reach my potential, fulfill my purpose, came into my life. The people, the resources, the opportunities, all of that. And, never in my life did I ever have to make decisions for myself. And when I mentioned that I was in a codependent relationship, it was all about that. It was codependency. When I was in my parents' home, they told me what to do and made all the decisions for me. My job was to listen and obey at all times. And then I got married and my husband made all the decisions. I didn't know that I was supposed to think for myself, that I was capable of thinking for myself. Forget about knowing how, but I didn't even know that I had it in me. And next thing, I found myself divorced, alone on my own, a single mom having to make important decisions about my life and my children, big decisions, small decisions. And every decision, no matter how big or how small, left me debilitated and in agony, not feeling like I had the ability or the capacity to do so. I did, but I didn't feel like I did. So I've been on this long journey, learning various things, starting off with working with a divorce coach, going on to peaceful parenting, and then truly understanding about the inside out paradigm to understand my own psychology, and really have been able to, alhamdulillah, step into unapologetically being my authentic self and having the confidence to really take charge and make decisions in my life for myself and for my children. I went from fog and from confusion in my life to clarity and confidence in my decision-making ability. So now I know that I am called, and I have made it my mission to help divorced Muslims who are really trying to reestablish themselves again, gain clarity and confidence so they can take charge of their lives and build a life that they dream of living. So that's a little bit about me. And I wanted to let you know that, I ran a challenge recently in my private group, the Divorce Muslim Network on Facebook. You can go and join it there. And some of the things that we covered were how to successfully share your kids with your ex. And why that is so important is many reasons. Number one is Allah has asked us or commanded us to separate with kindness. Even in separation and divorce, we are taught through the Quran and how to separate with kindness, with justice, with fairness. And how often does that really happen? And through how we are instructed to separate, comes also being able to share children, parents being able to share children, so we don't harm or damage our children with our own anger or animosity, with our bitterness or resentment or whatever it has not been resolved from the marriage, or that is going on even post divorce, in terms of abuse or manipulation or control patterns that were in the marriage that are still being implemented in post divorce. So some of the things that are really important to look at are mindset and language. How you talk about your kids, with yourself and with your ex, how you treat yourself. Are you giving yourself the self-care and compassion that you need in order to show up as your best self? Are you interacting with the parent or the father of your child with empathy and compassion? And how can you do that with a person where there is so much friction or so much resistance and toxic behavior patterns with? And how do you communicate with that type of a person? And what happens, with the transitions back and forth where children are going from one home to another, which can be completely different spaces. And that is a lot for a child to adapt themselves to what is expected in one home and then what is expected in the next. And so we talked about in that challenge, those are ideal situations, and what that means. And parenting, in terms of parenting, when children are acting up or off track and displaying behaviors where it's hard to connect and it's hard to parent, and they're not able to do their best, they're not able to be on track, perform, and do their best as a child, the expectations that we expect from them at home and at school academically, and to have the well-being that they deserve to have, right? So what gets in the way of being able to separate with kindness? What gets in the way of connecting with your children in order for them to have the well-being, right? It's their behavior and what's going on with their behavior when they're changing homes. And it could be all of the new dynamics through the changes that they're going through, their response to having all of this change, having big feelings such as worried about their parents. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to lose one parent or another? Is their family is, their family is breaking up, and, really, really falling into place as a new dynamic, but they don't know that. And they take on their own parents' feelings and try to manage them. So it's important to know, to recognize you have your own emotions, and you have your own way of processing through your anger, your hurt, your pain, your frustrations, your sadness and resentment, whether it's at the surface level or whether it's way down below, and it's, trickling up, or even if it's running subconsciously way down below, it still comes out in actions and in behavior. So, understanding, our children's behavior is so important because it's an indicator of how your children are coping with the divorce. If they're having tantrums or defiance or crying or withdrawal, or any of the things that they may be experiencing, what's normal is they experience fear of abandonment, losing their foundation, which is, mom and dad. How do they cope with that? And feeling torn. Children can also feel like, children have loyalties to each parent. And sometimes, depending on what we put out, what we are saying as the parent, they can feel like they have to choose one side or another. They can feel like, if they don't, then they're going to lose the parent that expects them to cut off the other parent. And if they don't do that, they're at risk for losing that parent. So they are their thinking is really immature, which is understandably so according to their age. And it is everything that they are processing, they are feeling, is coming out through behavior. So it's a signaling to us as the adults and the parents that there's something wrong. I am not doing well internally, and this is what the behavior is displaying. Because so often we think, oh, why is he giving me such a hard time? Why can't he just listen and follow directions? What's wrong with him? Just behave, right? And we don't understand what the behavior is indicative of. No child intentionally is manipulative, tries to hurt their parents. They don't have that. They don't have that because they're born on the fitra. They are born pure, and they don't have that. The way they come into this world, it's as we grow and get exposed to their environments, is that we adapt those negative tendencies. So, when you have a child that is refusing, that is defiant, that is struggling, that is crying, that is whining, that cannot, maybe is laid down on the ground and refuses to go to school, and you're getting late for school, and you're stressed out because everyone's going to get in trouble, and maybe you're getting blamed for not getting your children to school on time, which is what happened to me. That was very stressful. One of my kids refused to go to school for a year. It was just his way of displaying that he couldn't handle everything that was going on, the pressures that he was going through. Yet every day it was a battle, and some days were good for me and some days weren't, in terms of how I responded to what was going on for him. Because if my mind is thinking about, oh, my ex is going to blame me, and then he's going to take me to court and say I'm an unfit parent, and my mind is there rather than in this moment on what this child needs to help him, I'm not going to be able to help him. And I had some moments where I yelled or I screamed, and I had to force my child, just to get into the car. And then I had some really good days as well too, where I wasn't thinking about what could happen, what may happen, or what had happened in the past. I was here in the now, in the moment, connecting to my child, and to help him moment to moment to be okay. So that's one of the things that I mentioned, is that if you are okay, you're present in the moment and not emotionally heightened, which is really hard to do because we trigger each other, children and parents. Then if you're okay, then you can help your child be okay. So that's what children need, is connection. Allowing them to work through what is going on for them, processing what they're feeling, giving them connection to get back on track. And they don't need to explain to you, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm afraid of, because they may not have the words. And yes, reassurance is important. And really, the reassurance that they need is that you're never going to abandon them. You're going to be here unconditionally, no matter what they do or what they say, how they behave. If they break down, if they have a mental breakdown, which turns into a physical breakdown, that you're not going to abandon them, that you can handle their mess. You can handle them falling apart and wanting to run away, wanting to kill themselves, wanting to just disappear from the world. And one of my kids, wore a hoodie for his whole fifth grade. And every day he'd go into school like this, and he would sit in class like this. And that is an indicator of how he felt. One of my children wanted to kill himself, and he would try to choke himself. And that was an indicator that the pressure was just too much for him to bear. And that was how he was responding to it. So while these things are happening, they need to see that you got them. You are that strong, solid support. Not just see, but feel. Like you're not yelling at them or screaming at them, because you're understanding where their behavior is coming from, and you're focused here, present in the moment, being able to offer connection, which is at a safe space, which is what they need to get back on track. So getting back into, are you okay? So how do you respond? What happens within you when your child misbehaves or when your child's off track? What gets triggered within you? Being able to recognize what are the big feelings or that rising emotion that you get when your child is not listening, when you have to tell your child something 20 times, or they they say they want something and you give it to them, but it's actually masking the underlying problem. It's not that, oh, I want the red cup or the blue cup, or I want to eat this. It's not about that. It's about filling some type of void. It's about, I'm struggling with something and I need your space and your presence and your connection to be able to get back on track. So this is a good opportunity to think about, how many times are you losing it with your kids? How many times are you able to be that strong presence and not get rattled when they're rattled, right? What do you need for yourself to give them the connection that they need, right? Because in order to be able to be that strong presence and offer that to someone who is melting down, to someone who is falling apart, to someone who is in turmoil internally, and it gets represented externally through behavior, it's hard work and it requires a lot out of you. So it's important for you to be at your best, right? The oxygen mask in the plane, if you don't have your oxygen mask on, being fueled with the constant flow of oxygen so you can breathe, there's no way that you are going to be able to help anyone else, especially your child. So being able to have a full cup for yourself. How are you filling your own cup? Are you filling and fueling and nurturing and nourishing yourself? And so how do you get grounded? How do you get centered? How do you internally find peace and strength during a time where you may be in inner turmoil? How do you what source do you tap into to pour that into yourself? And what is the source for you? And it is your GPS, your God protection service. It is your connection and your relationship to Allah, to the ultimate source. It is where you're going to get is the source for everything. It doesn't mean that, you open up and everything gets poured into you, but you are a human being that has a soul. So you have, spiritual nourishment. You're a body. You have to have physical nourishment and emotional nourishment. All of those things. That means that it's your responsibility to connect to your source. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself. And when you go to the source, all of the resources come to you. And that is where your most important relationship comes in. Because we all know that there is no power or might except for Allah. And we all know that Allah is the controller. He's the protector. He's the maintainer. He's the provider. He's the sustainer. We know those things, but do we really believe it? Do we really show up and act from that place? So, we all need, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? If you're trying to pour someone a cup of tea and there's nothing in your own cup, in your kettle, how are you going to pour for someone else? You just can't. So, this is an opportunity for you to know, where is that for you? Where have you been looking for this source? And me being in a codependent relationship and being in a state of codependency my whole life, I really believed, even though I believed in Allah, and I knew that all the power and the might was with Allah, that He was the controller of everything, I still looked to people. I still looked to people who can help me, who has my answers, who's going to tell me what to do. And my answers were never there because I looked for something that didn't exist. And then I was disappointed over and over and over again. And it caused more hurt and pain because I went to people or places that I thought I could help. Or, it's easier to kind of just numb the void, or to fill the void with something else, whether it's distractions, whether it's, idle talk, or whether it's wasting time, or whether it's entertainment. It could be drugs, it could be anything that is numbing you to what you really need to face. So we talked about that kids need connection to thrive. We talked about your child will be okay regardless of your circumstance or your situation, if you are okay. So it's not dependent on whether you're facing going to court, because I faced that, having to go to court and battle about support, battle about settlement, battle about custody. And some people battle and some people don't. Some people don't have to, because depending on the type of people you are, personalities you have. I was dealing with a person an ex was very, very, very controlling, narcissistic, and just thought it was his way or the highway. And when I didn't agree with what was laid out for me, then it did become a battle. And, and that is stressful, having to go to court and having to, show up and defend myself and present my case to the judge in terms of support, in terms of child custody. And so all of those situations can be very stressful. And then if you're carrying that stress around with you, it comes out on the children. We cannot use our children as our therapists, as a place to unload everything we feel about what's going on in our life, everything we feel about their other parent, which is our ex. It's a completely different relationship. One is parent-child, and one is, ex-spouse. So they need connection to thrive. And what do you need to give them the connection so that they need? And that's really important here. And I want to share something, a couple of things. So my children are a lot older now, but when they were in middle school, like teenagers, like 12, 14 years old, their father had given them mobile phones, cell phones, and use that as a form of control, manipulation, and to be in constant conversation with them when they were in my home. So the thing is that, when you have two different homes, you're in charge in your home and the other parent is in charge in their home. And that's one of the things I talked about as well, letting go, because you're no longer, you're in two households. So each one of you are running your own home and household. And uh, children have to adapt to the different households and homes and parents. It's not just under one roof, and when you're under one roof, one person may be making all the decisions, and that's okay. It works. But with me, it caused all sorts of issues in my relationships with the boys, because they were always struggling with, okay, well, dad is telling us to do this, this, and this, and to respond in this way. And they're conflicted because they are feel like they are obligated to listen to him, but they're in my home, so they're not listening to me, and they're becoming more and more defiant. So it caused all sorts of issues in my relationship with my boys. Every time something would happen in my home, they were ordered to tell him, and they were being instructed on how to respond and react towards me, and it just became a nightmare. And we had a lot of difficulty, and it came out in their behavior of opposition, of defiance, of wanting to run away, of destruction, of destroying, of aggression. You can imagine what we were going through in our home, because they were being put in the middle, because they were in high conflict. So, that's how it showed up. It showed up through defiance. It showed up for them in terms of aggression, of hitting, of fighting, of lying, disengagement. I couldn't get them off their devices because they felt like they had to always constantly be communicating and responding to what their father was saying. And I wasn't able to connect with them. And I was just in my mind thinking, oh, he's doing this and he's doing that. And, once I figured it out, I hadn't realized how much of my thinking about their father was getting in the way of me really seeing the situation clearly and connecting with the children. Meaning, I could talk to you about the craziness that was going on in my head, and I'm sure that you would get it, because I think we have all been there. When I was focused so much on, oh, but he's doing this, oh, but he's saying this, this is why I can't, this is why I can't. I kept on, that was my internal dialogue. That was my self-talk, that I was saying that, I can't connect with my kids, or I can't, I'm struggling with them because of him. And I was always blaming him. Even though he was doing those things, it was not allowing me to take charge of my home. He's not physically here. He's out there, and he is in communication with them. But the way I showed up and how I took charge, I wasn't taking charge before. I was just being a victim. And I was just blaming him, and all the power was in his hands. And me, I ended up being totally helpless in my own home. And I understood this, as I understood my own psychology and how we work, and understanding where our feelings are coming from. And that allowed me to really understand even my own subconscious thinking. And so what I understood is, who really has the power, right? He doesn't have power over me or my home. I am giving him the power in my mind. And in that moment, it was my thinking that was taking my power away from me, not him. And so when I took him out of the equation, out of the picture, basically out of my head, I was able to neutrally and calmly able to connect to my kids, and be able to talk to them and connect to them without bringing him into the picture. And I was able to take charge from a calm, neutral place. So I wasn't defensive, or I wasn't blaming them. I was able to show them that I'm in charge, not from a controlling way, but neutral, calm way. And I was able to take charge in my home with my kids. I was able to set limits and respond to the behavior that was ensuing. from what he was doing. And then when you set that limit and the boundaries of what is okay, what is not okay, from a calm, neutral place, not from a crazy, frenzied place, it allowed me to connect to my children without having my ex in the way. So it didn't matter. And I was able to actually deal with the phones. I was able to actually deal with me and the kids. And it was just very important to see how much we actually believe someone has power over us. It feels so real in the moment that him and his actions had power over me and my reactions, that he was the cause of my anguish and my turmoil. I was battling him in my head, but in reality, my behavior, I was battling with the kids. So it was important for me to understand my own psychology to be able to connect to them in the correct way. And I want to share with you another story with my daughter. So at this point, the story I just mentioned was a few years ago. And at this point, my older boys live with their dad. And my daughter, who was 8 at this time, lives with me. And the kids see each other every weekend. And so what had happened was that my children are under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure to be able to be a certain way, to perform a certain way in terms of expectations of behavior. So their father gave my daughter it's a watch, but it's a tracking device and a phone, all encompassed. And he expects for her to call him every day at a certain time. And so there's a lot of pressure. And for an 8-year-old, even 7 at the time, for her to have to remember that daily, kids don't remember, they forget. And so she would get messaging every time she would visit with her dad, like, why aren't you calling me? You need to call me. I want you to call me at this time. And she would just feel the pressure that if she didn't do this, she was not good enough, or she would disappoint him. And children, all they want to do is please their parents for validation. And it was a lot of pressure for her. So one day she was talking to her dad on the phone, and he said, how come you didn't call me? I wanted you to call me all these days and you didn't. I was waiting for you. And I don't know what else had the conversation, but she came downstairs and she told me that, he got upset, and he kept on asking why I didn't call him. And she didn't have an answer for him. And at the time they got disconnected, but she thought he hung up on her. So she was quite upset and quite distraught. And the following week, the upcoming weekend, was her time to go and visit with her dad. And she adores her dad and she loves her dad, and she was looking forward to it, but she couldn't go. And meaning that she was anxious and apprehensive about facing him. About facing him and his expectations of her. So she wasn't going to come and tell me that. So what ended up happening is she said, I'm not going to daddy's house. I don't want to go. She kept on coming up with reasons why she shouldn't go, why she can stay with me. And at first I was like, oh, this is your time with your dad. You're looking forward to it. You love him. But then she became even more resistant, because what I realized also is that everybody, no matter how old or young you are, wants to be acknowledged. They want to be heard. They want to be respected, right? And their thinking or their thoughts or their feelings, they want validation of that, no matter how old or young you are. And that's what she wanted from me. So when I recognized that, I just listened. And I used all these tools that I've learned from peaceful parenting in terms of providing the safe space to listen to her. And as the days went by, her insistence on not going to her father's house was becoming greater and greater as her anxiety was building and building about having to face her dad when she went. she started threatening. She started having temper tantrums. She's like, I'm not going to go to school. I am not going to do my homework, and I'm not going to do this and that, until I gave in and said, no, you don't have to go. That's what she was looking for. She was actually procrastinating, and she was avoiding uh, having to face up to meeting her dad, and this expectation that she couldn't meet uh, of his, and everything she was telling herself about it. So as the time approached for her going, it was the day before, and she was at the worst in terms of her tantrums and her crying and her insistent. It was getting worse and worse, of her not going. And I, remembering what I learned from peaceful parenting, I knew that she had it in her to work it out, but she needed connection, in order to get back to her place of resilience, her place where she can feel comfortable and confident to make the right decision. So that's what we did. We ultra zoomed in on connection time. So what does that mean? It means that I gave her some time, and in peaceful parenting, we call it special time, which means that it's all about the child. The child directs, the child leads. And so we did an activity that I know that she always loves to do during our special time. And so we went and we did that activity together. And I didn't talk. I let her talk. I let her lead. I answered her questions. I just let her lead. I didn't use it as an opportunity to talk or teach a lesson or anything like that. It was all about her. And so after we were done with that activity, she was a completely different person, and it's like magic, I tell you, because I've experienced this many times. And because I had asked her, I said, maybe you should call your dad and talk to him before you go. It'll be easier for you. And she said, no, no, no. And then she came up with another idea all of herself. She said, I can write him a letter. I said, that's a great idea. So she got out a piece of paper and she started writing a letter, Dear Daddy. And I just said, write how you feel. And I told her, write the truth. The truth is always going to be the best way. And so she was open to hearing it. Before, when I wanted to talk to her about it, she was not willing to hear it because she was not heard herself first. And so connection allows a human being, no matter how old or young they are, to use their sense of decision making and judgment properly, because it allows you to that part of your brain to be highly functional at that time. Because she wasn't emotionally heightened at that time, she was able to work through her emotions by then, which the connection allows to do. So she wrote the letter, and the only thing I had helped her with was at the end was, I'm doing the best I can, and that was what I helped her add in. And she felt really good about it, and her demeanor completely changed. She felt empowered to be able to use her voice. She felt that she had a handle on the situation, that she could make a decision and take charge of the situation. And she took charge by writing the letter and felt like she had a way to communicate with her father, who is her girl's first male relationship in life, which sets the base and the foundation for all male-female relationships that they have in their life going forward. And so she felt really empowered to use her voice and express herself. And she was looking forward to meeting her dad, because she felt empowered to be able to communicate with him on her terms. And so she gave him the letter right away, and then they had a conversation about it. And she came back and she had a great time, and she said that it went well. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask her more questions, but I can tell by her demeanor and the way she was talking about it, it went well for her. It ended well for her because she was able to go and face something. It also taught her that if you have a problem, running away is not the solution. Procrastinating and avoiding it is not the solution. It taught her that facing it, dealing with the uncomfortableness of it is allows you to overcome and move forward, especially in relationships with family. So I think they had a conversation about it, what would be helpful for her, and she's implemented some of those things that I think her and her dad have talked about, because I see some changes in her with her. Like she writes it down on her whiteboard in her room. She writes it down on her journal, reminders to call dad at this time, call daddy at this time. And sometimes she forgets, but she is not as anxious or nervous or apprehensive about how he's going to respond, meaning he can still respond in the same way, but she's not as nervous about it. And I think also, he's more open to communicating with her. So maybe he's not responding as angrily or stressed as he would have, upset as he would have, as before, because she came forward. And I even offered for her to say, I can remind you to contact your dad, because that's a lot for, a 7, 8, or 9-year-old child to have to carry that burden that, I need to do this. And if I don't, then what will happen? What does it mean to me? So children come up with all sorts of stories. It means that my dad doesn't love me. It means that I'm not good enough. It means that, and that goes into validation issues. So the point of this is that I had to understand what my child needed. I had to understand what her behavior meant. I had to understand how to give her what she needed. And I had to be in that place to separate my interactions and issues and dealings with her father, which are separate than my interactions with my child, number one, and then my child with her other parent, knowing that a child needs two things to do well, whether their parents are together or not, whether their parents are living under the same roof or not, or they're married or divorced, is that they need to not be in the middle of a conflict between their parents, number one, or exposed to that. They need to not feel obligated or torn or loyalties on one side or the other. Number two is they need to have a healthy, meaningful relationship with each with each parent, because that is the foundation of what is going to help them get a sense of self, get a sense of being, of where they belong in this world, and how they move forward with well-being. So, I want you to know that it is possible to co-parent or even parallel parent, which means that you each are doing your own thing and you're not communicating in how to parent. You're just parenting on your own side, but you're still able to do things for the benefit of your children. That means you're able to hear each other. You're able to negotiate. You're able to collaborate. And it is possible for your kids to thrive post-divorce. It is possible to reinvent your own life, to live with confidence, authenticity, and with purpose. And all of these things I have learned, I have implemented into a program that I've designed called Reinventing Life After Divorce. And so, but, if your feelings are coming up and they're getting in the way, if you're overwhelmed, you are not going to be able to do that successfully. If your feelings are getting triggered and released onto the kids, you're not going to be able to do that successfully. Your kids are going to get caught in the crossfire, and it can be unintentionally. And that is where the harms of divorce come in. Your kids will experience harms of divorce, of families splitting up, if your stuff is not resolved or dealt with. And it could be on the surface level, and it could be way deep down below that you're not aware of, but it's coming out in your tone, it's coming out in your communication, it's coming out in your actions. And that was one of my biggest breakthroughs, is that I had to separate my dealings with my ex and the feelings that I was having about him in my head, with my relationship and my communication with my children. And being able to have a clear mind and separate those things really allowed me to approach their father separately in communication. And it allowed me to even deal with parental alienation. Now, when you're dealing with a very, very controlling, narcissistic personality, it gets worse. It gets worse because, especially when you've had patterns in the marriage that's of full control and being dominated and being controlled and allowing it. And now it's something completely different. It's unrecognizable. You become unrecognizable to that person, and they don't know how to deal with you. And they don't know, they feel out of control because they're not in control of you. So it gets worse. It gets a lot worse. And so that's why it's so important to get over that fog that you get into when you are dealing with controlling or abusive relationships. It really does become about a fog. You fall into fear, you fall into obligation, you fall into guilt, which is the acronym for fog. And it's so subconscious, you don't even recognize it. You don't even recognize it. I had an example. I'll give you another example where it was my time with my children. It was my weekend with them. And they were being told that they had a choice whether they wanted to go or not. And children don't get a choice. They have to spend time with their parents. They don't get a choice whether they want to live with their parents. And the parent does not get to have a right to tell their children, you can choose whether you want to go and see your mother. That is emotional manipulation, and that's abuse, because feeling torn and loyalties that a child has to agree and align with what the parent wants, regardless. But in this case, it's to break the ties between the other parent. In my situation, it was with me, and I fell into my previous patterns also, even after years of working on this and extracting myself from these patterns of control. I fell into the same fog of just confusion, and that's what manipulators do. They go on to tangents and start talking about other things, and that confuses you to believing what they're saying is true. And so for a moment, I fell into that same trap that, oh yes, I have to start respecting my boys who are teenagers now, of what they're saying that they want. And it turned into a whole thing about respect, that I'm not respecting them or their decisions, and they're turning into adults. And that was the messaging I was getting from my boys as well. And I knew that it wasn't their words, because it was the same words that was coming from their father. But they just felt compelled to say that to me. Now, they don't act that way when they're with me, only when they're with him. So it turned into my boys behaving one way with me and behaving one way with their dad. So they're learning they're not able to access their true authentic self and be themselves and do the right thing, rather just doing what they think they need to do to please the person that they're in a relationship with, which is a very dangerous thing. So when I fell into that fog myself for a few moments, I was oppressing myself, and I was allowing their oppression of me and their the father's control and oppression of my relationship with my boys, until I recognized it, and then I put a full stop and a limit and a boundary on that. Saying, no, it's my time, with my children, and he has no say in it. He has no authority over it. He has his time where I don't get involved. I don't decide what they do, what they don't do. That's their time. It's between the father and the kids. And this is my time between the father and the kids. And we have things protecting us, judgments and rulings from the court. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is that understanding your patterns of behavior, understanding your psychology, and understanding what's right and what's wrong, because when you get confused, it's very easy to believe what someone else is telling you versus doing the right thing. So when we understand ourselves, our psychology, and when we're okay, then our children are going to be okay no matter who is doing what to them. So I just want to check in and see if this has been helpful so far. And I want to hear your insights. I want to hear your takeaways. So please send them in. And I want you to know that intuitive parenting, you are already equipped with it. You know, you're able to parent from that intuitive place and peaceful place inside, and you will know what to do in the given situations when you're not emotionally heightened and when you have taken care of yourselves, right? When you can think clearly and objectively, when you can trust yourself and your intuition, not second guess yourself. And which is why I put together a program that allows you to connect to yourself, your two most important relationships, yourself and with Allah. And together with understanding your psychology and your own well-being, to get yourself in good condition, to heal and to be whole and healthy, so you can offer that to your children no matter what you're going through. Because it's not about the circumstance, it's not about the situation, because we know that we're all going to be given tests, and it's how do we respond to them? How can we tap into our own innate resilience, which Allah has already given us, right? So that is already within you. But as I've explained to you in the examples I've given to you with my children and with my boys, it is possible, no, regardless of who is trying to do what to you. So you know, it is possible to successfully co-parent or even parallel parent. So, and support your children through household transitions and to heal from any trauma or conflict that they're being put into in the middle. And to be able to stay calm and collected no matter what they do or what you learn about the other household or the parent. And be able to communicate with your ex and kids with clarity and confidence. Being able to set clear and firm boundaries that you need to when you're shifting from a marital relationship to a parental one only, kind of like a business relationship, and to move forward in the life that you reinvent to live with confidence, authenticity, and purpose. So, you know, a little bit of what others are saying is that, you know, that this was a best investment in herself, and self-care was a catalyst to my growth, is integral to personal growth. And, you know, working with other people, especially with having a divorce coach, which was helpful for me, is really important after dealing with a life-altering change, which divorce is. It can be traumatic, and there's a lot of grief to process, healing to be done. And one of my clients really talked about how she was able to work through her big feelings and have more of a self-awareness and help her adult children in dealing with their divorce and all the aftermath. I had another client who was overridden by guilt and self-doubt, and was subconsciously always looking for people to tell her what to do. And then she realized that she should only work towards pleasing her creator. And when she realized that, she knew what her path was going forward. And I had another client who was struggling in her marriage. And, you know, I'm a divorce coach, and I help people post-divorce and through their divorce. But my goal is not to get you divorced. My goal is to help you gain clarity and confidence in what is right for you, what is the right decision for you. And I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you gain that clarity and the confidence for yourself, so I can help you with that. And so this client talks about struggling in her marriage and other areas of her life with her kids, and how to think differently in her situations, in negative situations. I didn't tell her what to think, but helped her to see different perspectives that she could see herself. helps her to stop making up stories in her head about what could happen in the future and to live in the present moment, because no one knows the future other than Allah. Um, and it's allowed her to know that she's strong enough to make this journey in the right direction. So I'm going to ask you what it would mean to you if you could help yourself and your children to heal from the trauma of divorce. And are you ready to be able to communicate with clarity and confidence, and reinvent your life after divorce, to live that life of confidence, authenticity, and purpose? So I want to offer you something, and I'm glad that you're here till the end. A gift to spend some time with me to get through the fog, and we are going to create a crystal clear vision of the life you want for you and your children. And with that vision, you'll be able to go in the direction that you want and uncover any hidden challenges that you're having, and see how you can be the foundation to be emotionally healthy for yourself and for your children, and to be really re-energized and inspired to go forward. So this is an opportunity that I'm gifting you, a 30-minute breakthrough session with me to get clear on the life that you envision for you and your kids, uncover what is holding you back and moving forward in the life that you envision for you and your children. So go to www.meetraisa.com and book in a time that works for you. So I would love to hear your insights, your takeaways, and if you can't tell me here now, then go ahead and email it to me, and I cannot wait to talk to you and to hear from you soon. Take care. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum.